from the studios of WRHU on the campus of Hofstra University in Hempstead, New York. It's Election Night 2019. Now your hosts, Kenny Conrad and Eli Finkelson.
Hello everybody and welcome inside our coverage of Election Night 2019 live from the WRHU mixing site as well as streaming on WRHU FM and on Facebook at Facebook Live. Well, hello everyone, I'm Kenny Conrad joined by Eli Finkelson. We'll introduce our guest panelists in a second, David North. But first, Eli, many results aren't in at this point, but we do have some early leads, and we're looking at some of the top races here in Nassau as well as the Suffolk County executive race.
Right, so we have some Suffolk County executive numbers in at about 60% reporting. We've got Steve Ballone, who's taking a tight margin, but he's definitely pulling ahead a little bit. We have Gillen and Clavin in the Hempstead supervisor race, about neck and neck at only 1% of reports coming in. We also have the Glen Cove mayoral race that's coming in. It's about 1% also, but Tenke is definitely taking a lead.
So certainly some races we're looking at here early on. Now let me bring on our guest panelist, David North, a longtime Long Island multimedia journalist. His work has appeared on Walk 97.5 FM as well as News 12, and he's a member and has been honored by societies such as the Professional Club of Long Island, the Press Club of Long Island, excuse me. David, just first off, before we jump into these races more specifically, can you just talk about why tonight is important? Because there's some people who maybe just might be interested in 2016 and 2020 and 2024, but why is 2019 important?
Well, Kenny, first of all, thank you for welcoming me. Among those credentials, I have to say I'm very pleased to be with WRHU and Hofstra University. This is a first for me. And I think it's very appropriate to set the scene and why Hofstra is an appropriate venue for us to cover this election. This is being called an off-year election. It may not have the excitement of a presidential election or the transformational drama of last year's election when we saw a sweep in Congress. But Hofstra University is also home to the National Center for Suburban Studies, and because of the suburban character of Long Island, the Hempstead town, that we are uniquely qualified to study what is going on in this election around the country. People will be tuning in and looking at the results of Long Island elections to see what trends might be foreshadowing for next year's presidential election. Does President Trump have coattails here among the still strong Republican presence on Long Island, or could this be something that indicates that we might have a big shakeup in Washington come next year? So I hope folks who are tuning in tonight over the air or watching on Facebook will grasp some of the drama that's going on tonight and see why this election matters to all of us.
And is there anything so far, I mean, we're talking just very preliminary results, is there anything so far in your opinion that kind of speaks to any sort of trend early on here in some of the early leads and results we have gotten?
Well, one thing that's fascinating for a lot of people who may not look beyond their own communities to see the communities throughout Long Island, the Hempstead supervisor, for example, and the Nassau County executive, first Democrat in almost a century, also a woman. I don't know if this says something about our society and our culture, that when things are somewhat broken, a woman is called in to clean up the mess and fix things that the boys have messed up. So that may be a trend as well.
So let's jump into some of these early races here and some of the hot races that we really want to focus in on. And you just touched on a little bit, David. This Hempstead Town Supervisor race, you mentioned Laura Gillen. She is the incumbent, has come in and done a good job of fighting corruption so far here in the town of Hempstead, and that's been something that she's really kind of leaned on throughout her campaign. And on the other side, for the Republicans, we have Donald Clavin, Jr. of Garden City. He's running on the conservative line. And he's currently the town's receiver of taxes. At the moment, Clavin is ahead by a slim margin with 0% of results reporting. So very early on here in this race. So I think that, jumping into this race, what does Clavin have to do here to kind of unseat Gillen in this race?
Well, he is basically working off his professional strength as someone, a receiver of taxes. Big issue, even on the other side of the county line, people are aware of that tax assessment, property tax assessment, an enormous issue in Nassau County. The county spends an enormous amount of its budget on settlements, and at least $100 million to pay interest on previous year's settlements. So that's money that could be going into social services, to education, to infrastructure. If he can capitalize on his role as a tax assessor and convince voters that he's the man who can straighten it out, then that's his edge.
But Gillen has come in and already laid out a plan, right? She's already coming in with a plan to have $42 million put back into the infrastructure. She's already spent $17 million, and that's something that's been very important to the people that she's spoken to. How can Klavan come forward with a plan like that to sort of get in there and, versus the things that she's already done?
Well, at this point, it's all promises. We have an incumbent who has an opportunity to take the lay of the land and build some confidence in the voters that she's the one to do it. It's up to the voters to determine whether or not they see that. But yes, until they straighten that out, Nassau County and Nassau communities will be investing too much money in the mistakes of the past and not going ahead in the future.
And how about, let's talk about, how important the minority vote is. I think in all this, in this election for these two candidates, I mean, who do you think has done a better job so far of appealing to that minority and, trying to get their vote? Because that could be absolutely crucial, I think, in this race.
This is a subject that many people around the country who look at Long Island are very surprised about, that we're regarded as an enlightened society here in New York and in Long Island in particular, and yet the segregation here is surprising and amazing to many people. Until education is straightened out and everyone has an equal opportunity to a good education, we're just not investing in our children and our communities. So again, it's up to the candidates to reach into those communities and demonstrate that they will help the young people move forward to attain education, succeed, and become taxpayers themselves.
Right, and moving a little bit towards Klavan, who's fighting to unseat the incumbent here, both candidates have touched on corruption as something that they'd very much like to focus on. The Republican Party has now had 2 scandals of corruption that they've focused on, that they're trying to sort of get over. How do you think Klavan can sort of overcome this Republican scandal?
Well, Klavan may have given lip service. I don't know if you recall that on the way out, the previous gentleman who held the office started awarding patronage jobs and contracts. Mr. Klavan has said, no, that was wrong, I wouldn't do that either. So until Nassau Republicans can demonstrate that we get it, oh yeah, crime bad, let's not do that, they're going to be suspect. Voters will be watching.
And let's stay in Nassau County. Let's move over to the district attorney race. This is something that we're watching pretty closely here as well. Right now, Madeline Singas is the incumbent of the Democratic Party. Frances McQuaid, a Republican, looking to unseat her here. And Singas, if you go by the numbers, right now she's leading 60 to 40% with 11% reporting. If you go by the numbers, 25% drop in crime in Nassau County. She's really done a solid job and put an emphasis on fighting the opioid addiction here in Nassau County. Just what's the feeling around her heading into this election, and how confident can we be that she comes out on top tonight?
Well, you're right, Ken. Crime statistics are down. Nassau County is say unique in many ways, but the fact that there are suburban issues and urban issues all within the same county makes it a very challenging position for a law enforcement officer. Madeline Singas took the job after Kathleen Rice moved on to Congress, but she has demonstrated a great commitment to combating drug abuse, controlling weapons trafficking, gang activity. And one of the things that impressed me personally when she took office was that she went after animal abuse, saying that that's a character indicator that there may be the people who engage in animal abuse will also be involved in domestic violence and just a scourge to the community. She made that a singular issue, and we hope she's making traction there. But as far as the Republican Party being linked up with crime, her challenger, Mr. McQuaid of Long Beach, is a former police officer, also a former Catholic priest. So let's hope he has the virtues of someone who can oppose crime. It would be a sin if not.
And I do want to touch on the Oyster Bay Town Supervisor and Suffolk County Executive, but first we have reporters out in the field tonight. So the first person we want to go to here is Jason Siegel. He's at Laura Gillen's headquarters at the Garden City Hotel. Let's hear what Jason has for us.
Hempstead Town Supervisor Laura Gillen is seeking her second term tonight. She is the first Democratic town supervisor in the town of Hempstead in over a century. One of Gillen's key issues has been battling corruption, and Gillen says she will continue to do so if reelected. She has implemented a measure that puts every town contract online to increase transparency. Gillen also wants to invest in infrastructure improvements. She says she completed $17 million in road improvements in her first year in office and has another $42 million in planned projects into next year. Gillen is running against Republican Don Clavin, who is currently the town of Hempstead's receiver of taxes, and Libertarian candidate Diane Madden, who is an animal rights advocate. Kenny and Eli, let's send it back to you.
Now we're going to go live to Morelli's restaurant where we find Nico Bermudez.
Republican Donald Clavin seeks to take back the role of Hempstead Town Supervisor for his party. 2 years ago, incumbent Laura Gillen became the first Democrat to hold the seat in over 100 years. Clavin's top running points include tax cuts and increasing the spending on infrastructure. We'll be here at Morelli's restaurant keeping tabs on what's going on. I'll have more later on as results start coming in. Back to you, Kenny and Eli.
Thanks, Nico. Now let's head over to the Town of Oyster Bay supervisor races. Jenny Goldstein back at the Garden City Hotel. She's keeping tabs on Joseph Saladino. He's the Republican running as a Democrat for Town of Oyster Bay supervisor. Let's hear what Jenny has for us.
I'm here at Morelli's restaurant in Westbury, where Republicans have gathered to hear the results of tonight's election. Republican candidate Joseph Saladino is here, and he's currently the 70th supervisor of the town of Oyster Bay, appointed 2 years ago in 2017. Prior to holding his current position as town supervisor, he served 6 terms in the 9th District as a New York State Assemblyman. And interestingly enough, he actually began his career as a broadcast journalist covering local news here on Long Island. Saladino is running for re-election against Democrat James Altadonna. Altadonna is the current Oyster Bay town clerk, and he's held this position since 2013. Although Altadonna is a Republican, he's running as a Democrat against Saladino in this race for Oyster Bay town supervisor. Results will be coming in shortly, and we'll keep you updated on this race. Back to you guys in studio.
Now we take it to field reporter Amira Iftikhar, who is also at Morelli's restaurant at James Altadonna's headquarters. He is a Republican running as a Republican against incumbent Saladino.
Republican James Altadonna, running as a Democrat, wants to take the role of Oyster Bay Town Supervisor to bring the town back to the people. Altadonna's top issues include balancing the town's budget and fixing up the roads. We'll be here at the race in the Garden City Hotel, keeping you updated as the results roll on in. Back to you guys.
And thank you guys for those reports. Obviously, we'll be keeping tabs on those, the most important, or some of the most important races here all night. And I want to go back to, I think we're having a good discussion about some of the most important races, but we didn't get to touch on the Oyster Bay Town Supervisor race too much, David. I mean, I think that when you look at this right now, it's going to come down to James Altadonna and Joseph Saladino here. Both of them Republicans. But it'll be James Altadonna running on the Democratic ticket. Just what's the landscape of this race right now at this point?
It's dystopian. Actually, Mr. Saladino would not be in office had there not been enormous corruption for the former town supervisor, Mr. Vendetto, and the former Nassau County Executive Mangano. Mangano is to be sentenced soon. Saladino, a good choice. I wasn't... Well, I was aware of his previous career as a broadcast journalist. There's hope for the rest of us. there is another dimension to public service. But he's had a short time to demonstrate his determination to say, no, really, we get it, crime is bad. I'm looking at Mr. Altadonna, former mayor of Massapequa Park. He is a Republican running on the Democratic line, which is kind of telling that the powerful Republican base didn't have a candidate who could step up and run for this office.
Right, and if we look at some early numbers that are coming in, Altadonna is actually leading with only 17% of reports coming in. He's actually leading 59% to 41%. Can you touch a little bit on why specifically you think that people are turning to the Democratic ticket, even though they know that he is a Republican, but he's running as a Democrat?
Well, clearly he is a known quantity within both parties. If he's got the endorsement of the Democrats, then apparently that's an okay. But with a record in Massapequa Park and being known through the Republican Party, reputations matter. As you can see, the folks who caught up in previous scandals and corruption have tarnished the reputation of the entire party. So we'll see how this plays out. These are still early returns, and it is reasonably well, looking good at this point for Mr. Altadonna.
And do you think that, when you look at Saladino in this race, do you think it's almost guilt by association kind of thing, where he was kind of tied in and almost is related to the whole Mangano thing because he was appointed, after, those guys left office? Do you think that Saladino in this case is almost dealt an unfair hand because of what happened before him?
This is where inside baseball comes in and some strategy comes in. He was a consensus of someone who had a good reputation, someone who knew his community, someone who could step in and try to calm the waters after the scandal. But regardless of what happens to him, he has done his role for the party. He gets a battle ribbon, if you will, and he's able to maybe surface again in another role and serve his party and his community in another time. But it's still not over. He may be the man who is back for another term.
Well, and speaking of the things that they're doing, Altadonna actually has a very interesting idea of putting term limits on any politicians that are running for 10 years to an elected position. Can you touch a little bit about what that might mean if you were to be elected and state that policy?
Well, just putting on my analyst's hat for a moment without looking at these two individual candidates, we hear a lot about deep state. If you have a term limit on someone, frequently what happens is that the party establishment is who calls the shots with a candidate of someone fronting and representing on a temporary basis. It doesn't give the voters a chance to see how this person works if he passes an audition, if you will, and can be returned to office, or she can be returned to office on their own merits. Someone who's doing very well, you may want to return them to office without a term limit. Again, it's up to the community to make those decisions.
And as far as the hot races, the last one that I want to dive into before we dig a little deeper on the Nassau District Attorney is the Suffolk County Executive race. 78% reporting Steve Bellone, the Democrat. 55% he's polling right now. He is the incumbent. John Kennedy Jr. at 44%. He is the Republican. This is really one of the only Suffolk County races we're going to get into based on our location here in Hempstead, but it is important to people in Nassau. Why is it important?
It is important because, well, primarily because we are an island. We are inextricably linked. We share so much in common. This may play to Mr. Bellone's strength among our environmentalist community. You may not be aware that much of Long Island gets groundwater from aquifers. County Executive Bellone has made water protection and preservation an important part of his administration. So I'm looking at Mr. Kennedy as a comptroller. His basis is financial. Now, Suffolk County has been described by the New York State Comptroller as having one of the most distressed economies among all of New York's 62 counties. Perhaps voters will want a comptroller to step in and address that. But in the meantime, Mr. Bellone says that he has corrected some of the financial mistakes of his predecessor and deserves to continue on his path. But it's looking like dollars in water in Suffolk County.
And the person that's challenging him, Kennedy Jr., he's also been a county legislator for 10 years, so he's coming in with an extreme amount of experience. He's also cited some different things about Suffolk, that they're actually in a lot of fiscal stress.
Yes.
So can you talk a little bit about how Kennedy Jr. could be running on that platform of this county's in fiscal stress, and he can help?
Well, a comptroller is responsible for budgets. I think one of the things Mr. Kennedy had said was that looking across the border into Nassau, there's an interim finance authority looking after Nassau's finances, and he maintains that Suffolk is in even worse shape than Nassau County. So that's why he's saying that he deserves a chance. Mr. Bellone says that he inherited a $500 million deficit from his predecessor and is on the way to addressing that. It's whose point of view do you take? Do you see things improving in Suffolk County? Do you stay with the incumbent, or do you want someone who is so determined on budget considerations and may not have the scope of experiences that Mr. Bellone has had? He was also a town supervisor in Babylon, so he's well equipped to handle the role of a county executive.
And in a few minutes, we're going to bring on one of our in-studio reporters, Danny Kosick, to talk a little bit about some of the Hempstead District races. But first, I want to dive a little bit deeper on the Nassau County District Attorney race. Right now, 62%, Madeline Singas has of the vote. She's the incumbent, and 23% are reporting at the moment. Both candidates promise here in this district attorney race to be sort of politically independent. But is that possible as far as, has Madeline Singas shown it's possible, and you think it is possible here going forward, no matter who's elected in this race?
I think, I'm not sure which mayor of New York said this, but there's no Democratic or Republican way to shovel snow or plow snow. In this case, crime is something that affects us all, and we will address it in a professional way without favor. It becomes political in this aspect based on some of the prejudices of people in the community. The president makes a point of immigration as a source of crime, illegal immigration as a source of crime. There is gang violence. MS-13 has a presence in Suffolk and in Nassau as well. If people are allowed to play to their prejudices, and might say that the Republican way of going after crime would be to go after immigrants in our immigrant community, the minority communities, they may be inclined to vote for the Republican. Again, you can't read people's minds and hearts, but that is one thought, to wonder if the president has coattails into Nassau County.
Yeah, and then to help us discuss this a little bit further, we're going to bring in studio reporter. This is Danny Kosick. Hi, Danny.
Hello, how are you guys?
So, Danny, talk to us a little bit about what you're seeing in terms of numbers right now for the three races that you're looking at.
Yeah, so as you just stated, for Nassau District Attorney, with almost 24% of the vote in, incumbent Madeline Singas is winning with 62% of the vote. She's seeking her second four-year term as Nassau County District Attorney, and she's running on her record of a 25% drop in crime in Nassau County. So her office opened the first 24/7 treatment center in Nassau to address opioid addiction crisis, and with overdose deaths have been down by 20% under her reign as District Attorney. So she's running against Francis McQuaid, and he is a immigration and civil rights attorney, and he plans to address gang violence in Nassau County as well. And he vows to be independent without any political alliances in prosecuting public officials for corruption, as well as incumbent Singas is also running under the same ideals.
Yeah, and I think that when you look at the district attorney race, something that seems like it would stick out to me is what's the most prominent issue right now in the minds of voters, right? Because when you look at McQuaid, he's primarily focused at least on gangs and corruption and things like that, but Singas has really focused on opioids. So it's, what do people see and what's been framed as, I guess, the most important problem here on Long Island as far as crime goes, and that's going to sway your vote a little bit, at least in my opinion. I think that that's probably what we should really look at here, is what do voters feel is the more important issue, addiction or gangs?
They are, in some people's minds, inextricably linked, and some politicians will try to capitalize on that by saying, well, where are these drugs coming from? It's gangs that are importing these drugs, and that may or may not be true, as we see that frequently it's crooked doctors who are overprescribing. Right. So again, we have to rise above our prejudices. Mr. McQuaid, I should be more fair and know a little bit more about him as an immigration counselor. So we're not saying that he's giving into prejudices, but he's someone who understands the issues of facing many of the immigrant neighbors who are living in Nassau County. So whatever affects you personally, if someone in your family is going through the harrowing passions and struggles of addiction, if you've lost a loved one, then this is something you're going to want to fight with all your heart and soul, and you're going to get behind the person you think is going to best help you defeat that scourge. Weapons, there are so many urban problems that find their way into Nassau County that affect us all. Again, find the culprits, prosecute them fairly, justly, and try to make a stronger community. Education, to me, seems to be the key.
Well, it's interesting that you say both of those things, because that's something that McQuaid has actually touched on, both on of educating minors to the dangers of gang violence, but also prosecuting doctors and pharmaceuticals companies who irresponsibly distribute opioids. So I guess the hard part is she has the numbers that she's backing herself up with, but he's made promises on both counts. So what really distinguishes the two if they're both talking about the same things?
Well, at this point, it's that one of them does have a record. One of them has come in. Are you satisfied with the work she's doing? Do you see progress? Do you see promise? Do you think she deserves a chance to continue?
Right. And then, Danny, you also had 2 other races. Do you want to give us some updates on the Hempstead districts you're covering?
Yeah, for sure. So for Hempstead Town Council member in District 2, incumbent Republican Thomas Muscarella currently holds the lead with 56% and with about 40% of the vote in by now. So Muscarella is seeking his first full 4-year term as Hempstead Town Councilman, and he was appointed to his seat back in April. He's committed to improving town infrastructure, especially roads, and he would like to increase the budget for road repaving. He will continue to seek to give residents a chance to express their opinions about major projects in the town as well. He's running against Thomas Tweedy, Democrat, and he's seeking his first term as councilman as well. He was previously the mayor of Floral Park, and he is focusing on parks and roads as well, and he sees that they are in what he quoted as an unacceptable condition. He would work to ensure local communities have a say in projects as well, and because that's who these projects are affecting.
Right, and then can you just touch a little bit about why town council races are so important, right? They don't hold this grandiose title like district attorney or Suffolk County executive, but can you talk about why town council elections are important?
Your town council man, woman, person is your representative, is the person who advocates for you within the larger framework of your town or county. So yes, that's the face of your county government. You have to have that person's heart and mind working on your behalf. Who is going to do that for you? That's why it's so important for old-fashioned shoe leather politics. You get to meet the person who actually shows up at your door looking for your vote. Someone who holds a town meeting in your community, who knows which roads are the ones that have a problem, where you need a stop sign, where something needs to be better illuminated. It really gets down to the granular level when you're talking to your council person.
And I think that something that's interesting when I look and I studied up on these 2 candidates, Muscarella has been a big proponent of the Belmont project and building the railroad station at Belmont Park, whereas on the other hand, Tweedy has fought things like casinos and bigger projects like that. So I think that when you look at this race, that interesting dynamic of one's looking for bigger projects, bigger money type investments, whereas the other maybe a little bit more conservative. And I think that that's going to be something that could be a big deciding factor with voters.
And something beyond those council districts, those are 2 projects that affect communities outside of their council.
Right.
Those are things that, well, as you may feel about casinos or racetracks and gambling, you may not want anything to do with either of those. But that's a chance to generate some revenue. It's a chance to create some entertainment for the wider community of Suffolk and Nassau.
And now let's swing it back over to Danny. You're covering also the Hempstead District 5 race. What have you seen there so far?
Yeah, so far we're seeing that Republican Christopher Carini currently holds the lead with 53% of the vote, with about 70% of the vote in currently. So Republican Carini, he's seeking his first 4-year term as Hempstead Town Councilman, and he is a retired police officer. He says he'll work hard to reduce taxes and control town spending if elected. And he said he also has points about how the town's roads are in despair, and he supports increasing town spending to focus on road repaving. And he's running against Democrat Laura Webster. Webster's also seeking her first 4-year term, and she said she would like to fight corruption and defend taxpayer money. And she said the town needs a comprehensive infrastructure program to improve roads and protect them from flooding. So they both have some focus on fixing the roads here in Nassau County.
And then can we go to District 3? What do you got on District 3 right now?
Yeah, so right now for District 3, with 31% of the vote in, we have Bruce Blakeman, the incumbent, winning with 56% of the vote. He's seeking his second full term as Hempstead Town Councilman after serving his partial term in 2015. This will equal his second full term. And he's running against Sherry Renee James, the Democrat, and she's seeking her first 4-year term as councilwoman. She would like to lower town taxes and maintain a balanced budget, and she's also working to expand housing options for seniors and young people in the town. Blakeman says his primary achievement has been supporting tax cuts in the town and in its proposed 2020 budget, and he is also prominent of transit-oriented zoning.
Very nice. And then, so let's talk about some things that sort of hit right here at home in Hempstead. Can we talk about the Hempstead town clerk race right now? So Sylvia Cabana is the incumbent seeking her second term. Where are we in that race?
So right now we are at almost 50% of the vote, and right now it is 50-50 tied up between both of them, the incumbent Cabana and Republican Kate Murray.
And can you just talk a little bit about what a town clerk does, why that race is important for local people in Hempstead?
Again, a town clerk is another point of interface for your community. Town clerk is the person who keeps the records of the history of your community. Someone who will see to it that that you have your permits and you're able to enjoy the amenities that you're paying for with your taxes, and to make sure that it operates, again, fairly and smoothly. It's a manager's position. Kate Murray, former Hempstead supervisor, again, someone who has great experience with management, and as a former town clerk, she knows what she's getting into. People have seen her in action before, at least folks of a certain generation who experienced her as a town clerk. She wants to do it again. She has the acumen and the experience. She's made her case, and now it's up to the voters.
And Cabana here for town clerk, she's someone who's only been in politics really for one full term now. She's just seeking a second term. Kate Murray comes in with a laundry list of titles and positions that she's held. I know today on Twitter, there's a certain contingent of Islander fans here on Long Island who make up a pretty solid percentage of the population that feel that she's the reason that they don't play all their games here anymore and they moved to Brooklyn in the first place. So in this case, how much does having that laundry list of titles and background and baggage kind of hurt her in this race against Cabana?
Boy, political pundits talk about inside baseball, and you're talking inside hockey. Very good, Ken. Again, folks who may or may not have a history with Nassau County may remember a project called the Lighthouse Development in Uniondale involving the Coliseum. It was a very grand project, almost a city within a city in the heart of Nassau County. Kate said no as Hempstead supervisor. Probably a principled response because it would have had a great deal to do with infrastructure. A lot of it was speculative. It might not have worked. It might not have generated the money that the developer said it would. She had to be responsible for neighbors and neighborhoods and the traffic that was involved and whatever plumbing, just tearing up roads and everything for something speculative. She took, in her opinion, a principled stand and said no. But that drove the Islanders to Brooklyn. So there are a lot of regular blue-collar, tax-paying citizens who will hold that against her. So that is part of the plus or minus of being an incumbent. You have a record to run on. If you're proud of it, that's great. If somebody's holding a grudge against you or didn't like the way you performed your duties, they'll hold that against you too. In this case, town clerk, she has a history. We'll see, again, what the voters decide if she's made her case.
Well, and there's a 50-50 race right now. What do you think that 50-50 split says?
It says that people may like Kate very much personally, that they've had a good experience with her, may not feel that, I'm going to correct myself. She took a stand against her party on the Lighthouse issue, for one, that she may be carrying the banner for the Republican Party still, and people may not want anything to do with the Republican Party in that role with that particular candidate. I think that's what we're seeing is ambivalence in the numbers.
And let's swing it back over to Danny now. Let's talk a little bit about the Hempstead Receiver of Taxes race. What are you seeing so far in those numbers?
Yeah, of course. So that race is also pretty close with about 50% of the votes in. Janine Discroll has 52% of the votes against Democrat Chanda Ortiz. So, that was our last race. Ortiz is a private attorney specializing in real estate, and she wants to review budgets and make plans and ensure the town protects taxpayer money. whereas Discroll, she is an aviation attorney and has served as Belrose Village Justice. Discroll says she wants to make the tax office and its programs as paperless as possible, but while still making materials available to seniors and those who aren't online. Discroll wants to lobby for more exemptions for residents and seniors with those with disabilities. So she's really focusing on seniors in her campaign.
And David, this is a position receiver of taxes that some people may not even know what they do, or what kind of role they play.
Yes, they do.
So, I mean, just what can you say as far as this position and the importance of it to the everyday citizen?
Well, I think the point was made about transparency and being able to see what's going on, to know that things are assessed fairly, and that there is a process for staying ahead, making sure that the municipality has the resources it needs, but fairly, that the burdens are distributed equally, that someone is in charge and is doing things without a hidden hand, that everyone knows that they're being represented properly.
And we do have an early result here in, as far as the Suffolk County executive race goes. It appears that Steve Bellone, a Democrat and the incumbent, has won this race. We'll bring on one of our in-studio reporters, Celia Earl. Celia, as far as this race goes, just tell us how it kind of unfolded.
Well, what we have right here so far is we have Steve Bellone winning by 55% of the votes that we just got in through Newsday. We have over here. He won the seat of Suffolk County Executive by 55% of the votes, and following by his competitor, Republican candidate John M. Kennedy Jr. Bellone, this was his second term before his re-election as county executive, and he previously served as a Babylon Town supervisor. Bellone called Suffolk County one of the safest suburban communities in the nation, citing historic low crime rates and his focus on combating gang violence and the opioid epidemic as well.
So let's talk a little bit about, this is the first major result that we've gotten so far tonight for sure. Let's just talk about, what this means. What does this say about how the people of Suffolk County feel about Steve Bellone and the job he's done?
When we return someone to office, it means that we think he's done the job we elected him to do, and we're going to give him an opportunity to continue. We'll say that Mr. Kennedy has made a point about keeping an eye on Suffolk finances, and I'm sure as he continues in his role as comptroller, he'll be raising that, keeping an eye on Mr. Bellone as the county goes forward. Looking nationally at Suffolk County, President Trump came to Brentwood a couple of years ago after some MS-13 violence, murders. The nation is looking at Suffolk County, but despite those horrific gang violence episodes, those murders, Suffolk's crime rate is relatively low for a major county. So that's one thing that they are on notice. The police department throughout Suffolk County, law enforcement, everyone is aware of that. And again, back to the schools, back to education, back to making sure that vulnerable young people are kept on the right track and directed to become productive citizens. That's something we can't turn our backs on.
And despite the fact, just to bring this on a more national scale, I would say, Bellone, while he's running on the Democratic ticket, did put an emphasis on kind of streamlining the government and putting things more into perspective. And that was something that Donald Trump was a big proponent of when he ran for the presidency, was draining the swamp was the term that he used to kind of streamline the government. So while Bellone's a Democrat, wouldn't this also say something about people wanting that more streamlined government? That idea kind of hasn't changed maybe from 4 years ago in some respects.
It's about the money, Ken. Suffolk County, as Mr. Bellone said in his campaign materials, he came in with a $500 million deficit, and he took some very unpopular moves. I think 1,300 county employees were fired. The nursing facility, the county-owned nursing facility, was sold. The county offices in Hauppauge, the Dennison building, was sold and then leased back. These were bold moves, but they were facing a financial crisis. He's expecting that this is the right move in the right direction, but again, as Mr. Kennedy pointed out, Suffolk's bond rating has fallen. The Democratic state comptroller points to Suffolk as a distressed community, one of the most distressed among the 62 New York counties. He has his work cut out for him, but the voters have given him the opportunity to do that work.
And do you think that that is going to be something that Bellone really wants to do here in this, second term in office? You think he's going to kind of sit back, or you think he's going to continue trying to streamline and trying to save the county money at the end of the day?
I think he is a relatively young man for someone in such a responsible position. He's 50 years old. I think he is considering legacy, what children who are living in Suffolk will encounter in the future. That's why water protection and open space preservation and protection have been important parts of his mandate as he sees it. I will point something out about his determination. I don't know if you folks are familiar with Car Free Day on Long Island, where you choose a day where you will not use a car.
Right.
County Executive Bellone got on a bicycle from his home in Babylon and rode his bicycle to work in Hauppauge. This is a brave and determined man. So we'll see how he handles his next term.
And Celia, while we have you on here, as far as the other races that you're looking at tonight, is there anything else right now that's standing out to you in the races that you're covering?
So far, not all the results have come yet on the NASA legislation, but we will keep you up to date as these races develop.
Sounds good. Thank you very much, Celia. And when you look at, we're going to go to an interview now. Jason Siegel, who's one of our on-site reporters, caught up with Nassau County Executive Laura Curran. Let's hear what he has to say.
We're here with Nassau County Executive Laura Curran. Of course, not up for re-election tonight, but you were elected 2 years ago. What do you remember from that night?
It's very exciting, and I really think our message of economic development and transparency, anti-corruption, is really resonating with voters in this race as well.
And what is one thing that you most want to accomplish going into this next year?
Making sure that we grow the tax base, keep our young people, have enough housing options to make sure that we're vibrant and transparent into the future.
And what are your overall thoughts on tonight so far?
I'm feeling very good about tonight. I'm feeling very good about our chances because our message of economic development and transparency is resonating.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
And one thing that Curran touched on there, thank you again to Jason Siegel for catching up with Nassau County Executive Laura Curran. David, one thing she touched on there at the end that caught my attention was she feels good about their, prospects of economic development and the things that they've done so far since she's been in office. How do you feel like the voter base feels about that? Do you feel like they, at this point, feel like it's been a strong agenda or a strong, job so far by Curran?
Well, she was elected.
Yeah.
There's your answer. But I think it is something to feel positive about, just as a citizen in general, that the first Democrat to take that office and first woman, the field is open. Younger people, aspiring candidates will say that it's not just one party rule in Nassau County. It's not just one gender. This is something that is showing a future and encouragement for people who may have been marginalized in Nassau in the past.
And now both county executives, Suffolk and Nassau, are both Democrats. What do you think that says? What do you think Long Island has in store for itself?
Well, New York State, a blue state, and here we have two Democrats. I think historically, what is most impressive for longtime Long Island residents is that there is a new Democratic base in Nassau County. Traditionally a Republican stronghold, known as such nationwide. County executive at the time, Margiotta, was able to bring Richard Nixon to Nassau County in 1972, Ronald Reagan in 1980. This is where national Republican organizations looked to see how it was done, how to hold power and keep it. So a lot has changed.
Right. And then speaking of things that are changing, in terms of things that we can expect now from Bellone, I mean, he's made some serious promises about the things that he'd like to see in terms of like his plan for the county. So can you touch on things like his plans for what we have in store?
I'm thinking that he's going to want to continue with what he is doing. Environmentalists in Suffolk County are very concerned about groundwater contamination, about nitrogen leaching into our bays and harbors in Suffolk County. The one thing Nassau County residents should remember too, I know for many folks here, we regard ourselves as a suburb of New York City. You get on a train and you are oriented toward New York City. But we are an island. We share an environment. Along with the financial considerations, battling opioid addiction and crime, one thing is that we are not going to proceed as a community, Nassau and Suffolk County, if we cannot consume our water. Our tourism-based economy is not going to survive if we don't have a great environment. You may not be aware of this. Many New Yorkers, even Suffolk residents, aren't aware of this, that Suffolk County is one of New York State's leading agricultural communities. That's why nitrogen runoff from fertilizers is an issue in Suffolk County as well. To be prosperous as a agricultural community, as a tourism community, as a place to raise families safely, all these are part of the mandate of a county executive. And that's why the health of all of Long Island rests in the hands largely of the larger county on Long Island.
Right. And Steve Bellone actually started the Reclaim Our Water movement, the foundation that he started to try and help this cause. So he's got that going for him. So in terms of county positions, he's boasted that he's cut about 1,300 county positions.
Right.
Do you think that that's going to continue to drop?
This, I think, actually it kind of has to. There was a business term called right sizing. When I came aboard, when I arrived on Long Island, I was surprised. I believe this statistic is, well, it's a rough statistic that 1 in 10 Long Island residents was employed by government in some capacity. That's absurd. So there has to be some right sizing. Patronage, nepotism, these things have to be eliminated. Again, it has to be fairness, it has to be employment by merit, and people have to justify their jobs through performance. So if he's able to do that, a lot of people will be hurt. No one wants to be downsized, no one wants that kind of suffering. But again, we're electing representatives who have to represent us efficiently and use our tax dollars efficiently.
And with that, hour one of our 2019 election coverage in the books. One major result in, again, is it's Steve Bellone, the Democrat, taking down John Kennedy Jr. in the race for Suffolk County Executive. Plenty more coming up in hour two of our Election Night 2019 coverage. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. You're listening to Election Night 2019 on WRHU.
WRHU is underwritten in part by Christopher Cavallero and ARC Excess and Surplus, LLC. ARC Excess and Surplus is a wholesale insurance brokerage that offers professional liability products and services. Information about ARC is available at arcbrokers.com. That's arcbrokers.com.
The Donald and Barbara Zucker School of Medicine at Hofstra Northwell supports programming on WRHU Radio Hofstra University. Information about the Donald and Barbara Zucker School of Medicine at Hofstra Northwell can be found at medicine.hofstra.edu.
Carmela's Pizzeria and Restaurant is proud to support WRHU Radio Hofstra University. Carmela's Pizzeria and Restaurant is located at 910 Hempstead Turnpike in Franklin Square, 4 miles west of Hofstra University. Carmela's Pizzeria and Restaurant menu includes pizza, pasta, and other Italian food specialties in addition to catering. Carmela's Pizzeria and Restaurant features on-site dining and delivers food. More information about Carmela's Pizzeria and Restaurant of Franklin Square can be found at 516-488-9898 and online at www.carmelasrestaurante.com.
The Lawrence Herbert School of Communication is a proud supporter of WRHU, Radio Hofstra University. Information about the Lawrence Herbert School of Communication can be found on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and at hofstra.edu/Herbert.
Jim Metzger and the Whitmore Insurance Group Garden City underwrites programming on WRHU.
WRHU programming is underwritten in part by Shift Education of Technology. Located in Long Island City, New York, Shift Education of Technology offers training for careers in information technology within the software quality assurance profession. More information about Shift Education of Technology is available online at shiftedtech.com, or you can call at 718-713-1844.
Proudly broadcasting from the Richard Philip Cavallero Studios. WRHU. Hempstead. You discovered. A National Association of Broadcasters multiple Marconi Award-winning station. WRHU. Radio Hofstra University.
And welcome back to our second hour of live election night coverage here in WRHU's studios. We're going to take it right to our studio, our field producer, Jason Siegel, who is currently at Laura Gillen's headquarters, the incumbent Democrat for Hempstead supervisor over at Garden City Hotel. Jason, what do you got?
Thanks, Eli. We're here at Democratic headquarters at the Garden City Hotel. The Hempstead Town Supervisor's race was a historic victory for Democrats 2 years ago when Laura Gillen became the first Democrat to become town supervisor in over 100 years. Gillen is running for a second term tonight, going up against Republican Don Clavin, who is currently Hempstead's receiver of taxes. There's also a third-party candidate, Diane Madden, who's running on the Libertarian ticket. A lot of energy and enthusiasm here tonight. We've heard cheering multiple times as results start to come in. And right now it is a very tight race between Gillen and Clavin. Only about 100 votes separating the two candidates, with 51% of precincts reporting. And one thing to keep in mind, Diane Madden, the third-party candidate, was initially a Gillen supporter, so she could potentially be taking some votes away from Gillen in what's turning out to be a very close race. So we'll continue to keep you updated here as results continue coming in. But for right now, Kenny and Eli, we'll send it back to you.
And thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. And as we sit here, Madeline Singas has declared victory in the Nassau District Attorney race. So she will be serving her second term as the Nassau District Attorney. But I want to circle back before we discuss Singas, just on a couple things that Jason said. I think that when you talk about kind of the historic, he talked about the historic victory that occurred 2 years ago with Gillen's campaign, and said that it's a pretty optimistic view. But right now, David, very close here, 50 to 49%, under 1,000 votes separating these two candidates.
This is where ambivalence does come in. And of course, the idea that this is, again, an off-year election. A lot of folks aren't motivated to get out unless it's a presidential election. This may not have even come on the radar of some folks unless they saw some actual snail mail in their box that there is an election happening. So we have to say that only the determined people came out. And in this case, under circumstances like this, it's usually the opposition party that is more motivated to vote. So the fact that it's close at this point means that the challengers got out the best they could, and this was the best they could do. But your reporter also talked about the third name in the race, Diane Madden of East Meadow. She's a mother of four, an animal rights activist, describes herself as an advocate, somebody who is involved in government because someone cares enough. And this is a model. I don't think voters in that area have heard the last of Ms. Madden. I think she's learned a lot from this experience and may be a candidate for another office very soon. We'll see what kind of vote turnout she got, if she inspired enough people to say enough corruption, enough of business as usual, let's shake things up.
And let's stick with the Hempstead supervisor races as our own Nico Bermudez is on site at Donald Clavin's headquarters. Nico, what do you got for us?
So here at Morelli's in Westbury, Donald Clavin himself has not arrived, but there definitely is a lot of enthusiasm. Now, with just 51% reporting in, the race is neck and neck, about 100 votes between the two candidates. Now, this was expected as Laura Gillen, being the first Democrat in a century to hold this seat, is very popular amongst many of the residents as she is tackling corruption. That is her biggest talking point. Clavin, who finally brought together the Republican Party in Hempstead after the corruption and all the issues back 2 years ago. This race was expected to be very tight. Clavin is going after Gillen about her tax policy. His biggest thing is he is really pushing for a tax cut, and he is hoping that the people of Hempstead really see that and that they are not in favor of the way Gillen has handled the tax situation. So that's really what he's looking to do. Again, Clavin has not reported here at Morelli's. We're still waiting for him to come by. Back to you, Kenny and Eli.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that report, Nico. Just when we look at Donald Clavin, talks a lot, like we said, about tax cuts, whereas Laura Gillen may have been a bit more free spending with money. You know, she's definitely been interested in big projects, and although she does say that taxes have fallen since she's taken office because of fiscal management, I think that what's interesting here is maybe Clavin is more hard and heavy with the tax cuts, more kind of in your face about that, whereas Gillen, it's happened, but I don't think that that's really her number one kind of selling point at this point.
Well, that is Mr. Clavin's natural selling point, given his job as receiver of taxes. No one likes to pay taxes, but everyone likes the benefits of being able to fund the projects that keep us safe, that keep our water consumable, that educate our children, keep our highways and transportation systems functioning. I think the issue is fairness, and if the supervisor can demonstrate that taxes are being collected fairly, that the burden is being imposed properly, then she will win another term in office and she'll have an opportunity to demonstrate that.
Right, and the other thing that Nico touched on is corruption. So this race is so incredibly close. Do you think that this race is close because people are worried about the Republican Party's corruption or because they're overlooking it?
Again, as I said earlier, it's the challengers party that generally is motivated to get out the base and do the voting. If this was the best they can do and it's still close, I think that's telling. I think there would have been the remnants of the Republican machine would have been driving people to the polls to make sure that they made sure that it would be another 100 years before there was a Democrat in office.
And before we go to our reporters on site at the town of Oyster Bay Supervisor headquarters for those two candidates, I want to touch a little bit on, we mentioned it before, but our second major race of the night come in, and that's Madeline Singas declaring victory over Frank McQuaid. She's right now with 54% reporting at 60%. She is the incumbent. David, is there any surprise when it comes to the fact that Singas held on here over McQuaid? Do you think that this was pretty much an expected result?
Generally in politics, the incumbent has an advantage. Nassau County, because of the remnants of that great Republican machine, you never know when the machine will move and will inspire its members to participate at the polls. In this case, crime rates are reasonably low for a county of its size and diversity. She's demonstrated that. Her values, I think, also resonate very well with communities in Nassau County, working against domestic violence, being very aggressive against animal abuse. That's not an issue that is generally one of the first things that a new district attorney will talk about, but that was one of the first things she said when she took office following Kathleen Rice. It's the heart and soul of community and its values. Anti-addiction, anti-gang violence, anti-domestic violence, animal abuse. You set that foundation, it becomes ingrained, then your crime rate goes down, you have an effective district attorney, along with enforcement.
And there's something so unique about Singas too, is that she's a Democrat, but she's also a conservative. So that's something incredibly unique about her that you don't find all the time.
This is something that I guess part of it is our culture now that things are so polarized. There was such a thing as liberal Republicans. You folks here in New York, your grandparents may remember Nelson Rockefeller. I'm originally from New England. There was a tradition of liberal-leaning Republicans. Now everything is so polarized. I don't think any one party has a lock on conservative values. Look at the definition of the word, conserve. If you're conserving your community, you're conserving your family values, that can be someone who may have a more liberal social and physical orientation and still maintain the values of a community, conservative values. It doesn't mean, liberal doesn't mean profligate.
And again, Madeline Singas takes down Frank McQuaid 60-40 in the Nassau DA's race. She is declaring victory. Now, let's shift ourselves over to the town of Oyster Bay Supervisor race, where Jenny Goldstein is standing by at the Joseph Saladino headquarters.
Hey guys, so the night's been pretty hectic here at Morelli's. It actually began with the incumbent Joseph Saladino. He was leading several points ahead of Altadonna, who's actually a Republican running as a Democrat against Saladino. But that kind of sort of flip-flopped throughout the night. Around 10:30 tonight, it flipped where Altadonna was leading Saladino, and now Saladino is currently leading 58%, and Altadonna is at 42% right now, but only 58% of the votes are in. So just some quick notes about Saladino. He's been in local government since 2004. He's pursued many of his agenda items during his tenure, both in when he was in the New York State Assembly in the 9th District and as Oyster Bay Town Supervisor. Some things he's really strong on is the environment and water safety, and he also strives for transparency in local government. Kate O'Brien actually just interviewed him a few minutes ago. So back to you guys.
And thank you for that report, Jenny. This is a little different, David, than when we were checking in on this race about, I don't know, maybe 40 minutes ago. It seems like Saladino here is starting to pull ahead a little bit as the incumbent candidate.
This is, as we were saying, that he's had a brief time to get the lay of the land after coming in after a scandal. So Republican enrollment is still strong in Oyster Bay, as much as they may have been very disappointed by the previous supervisor, Mr. Vendetto. They are still the establishment in town. They have a lot of interest to maintain. If they have confidence that Mr. Saladino is the one who can do it honestly, with transparency, and just maintain some stability, apparently at this point it looks like the voters are willing to give him the benefit of the doubt.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's flip and go to Altadonna's headquarters at Morelli's Restaurant with field reporter Amira Iftikhar. Amira, what do you have?
We are live at the Democrat headquarters at Garden City Hotel following the race between Joseph Saladino and James Altadonna. Saladino's our incumbent for the town supervisor of Oyster Bay. Running against him is an unusual candidate, Republican running on a Democratic ticket, James Altadonna. However, Altadonna says he won't be here tonight as he's decided to stay home with his family. Tonight, it feels like a party with blasting music, balloons, and drinks all around. There's a cheerful and easy air despite the tensions of a race. Saladino is currently up ahead of Altadonna in the polls, and as for the Nassau County DA's position, Singas has won and already given her speech. We'll keep you updated as the night develops. Back to you guys.
And as Jenny had touched on before, our own Kate O'Brien did get the chance to interview Joseph Saladino. Let's hear what he has to say.
So what do you want to accomplish most if you're reelected?
Well, I'm very appreciative to our voters. I'm very appreciative to our residents, all of our volunteers who work so hard to bring this victory about. I want to make sure that we're moving forward quickly to rebuild our downtowns, continue to fix the finances, pay down the debt. We've eliminated the deficit altogether. And with this dream team of fabulous candidates that we're bringing in fresh new faces, we're really moving the town of Oyster Bay forward very quickly. I'm proud of that. That's what our residents want, and we are delivering the successes of all of these initiatives.
And what do you see as the biggest issue facing Oyster Bay right now?
We have a long list of accomplishments, but there's lots more to do. We're going to continue to do downtown revitalization development to make cool downtowns with transit-oriented development, more affordable workforce housing for our young people, and ensure that we bring about the best Oyster Bay with ideas from everyone of all ages and of all walks of life to become a true melting pot, to really make successes. We're going to continue to improve the finances, get more and more bond rating increases, but the development in our downtowns, Hicksville, Oyster Bay, and all the places where young people want to gather. We've seen it done very successfully in Farmingdale and Patchogue, and now the town of Oyster Bay will be the mecca for young people, for opportunity, for jobs, for growth of our economy, and great new places to recreate, have fun. We want people coming to Oyster Bay, and we want to be the shining star on Long Island.
What were your expectations coming into the election?
This is my 11th election. The harder you work, the luckier you get. But you don't do it alone. My expectation is that I'm proud and privileged to have these stellar candidates, to thank our chairman of the different political parties, the Republican Party, the Conservative Party, the Independence Party, to thank them for all their work. But the bottom line is we prove what team really means. Together, everyone achieves more, and that's what we're doing in the town of Oyster Bay. So this victory is resounding, and we're going to continue to move forward to change for the better in every way in the town of Oyster Bay and work with everyone. Young people want opportunities. People coming out of college want great jobs, places to live, great ways to recreate, and the town of Oyster Bay offers all of that. And we're going to continue to make it better and better.
And again, thank you to Kate O'Brien for catching up with Joseph Saladino at the Republican headquarters. And in that interview, we did get pretty much a declaration of victory from Saladino. Right now, he's polling at 58%, with 58% actually reporting as well. So what was your main takeaway from that interview? I mean, it seemed like to me he was saying, let's do more of the same. Let's keep the ball rolling on what he's been able to accomplish here over his first 2 years.
First of all, I want to compliment your reporter on a good interview. And I could hear a little bit of the former broadcaster in Mr. Saladino's voice. What I hear is confidence. And I think his goal, his mission now is to instill the confidence to a community that's had its confidence in its institutions shaken. Every initiative that he described and discussed involves people thinking that the bidding process is going to be fair for each of those projects, that their tax dollars are not going to be steered into some crony's pockets, that it is going to be directed toward revitalizing downtowns, that the contractors and people bidding for those projects and looking to employ many people to create those downtowns and those new venues, the new business that will open up and hopefully prosper and draw people into the beautiful community of Oyster Bay, will be fair, honest, and will have a reputation for honesty, fairness, and transparency. You heard the sound of confidence there. He knows what he's up against. He's been following and confronting it for the last several months. So now it's in his court if in fact he is the winner.
And he did actually touch on it a lot. It's something we haven't really touched on yet tonight, but he really focused on the youth population, bringing more young people into Oyster Bay, right? Revitalizing the downtown areas, adding more affordable housing for young people. What do you think that platform has done for him?
I think everyone who visits Long Island will find a community and say, this is beautiful, I want to be here. And then they'll look at the cost of living and they'll say, maybe another time. So every municipality on Long Island is confronting that. Mr. Saladino pointed to a few success stories, one of them being Patchogue in Suffolk County. There's been a housing boom there, a revitalization in the downtown, a repurposing of the downtown. Not so much stores anymore as entertainment venues and restaurants. Perhaps Long Island really has to continue to re-envision what its roles in its communities are, to get over its prejudices against affordable housing and mixed-use housing, and find other businesses that will employ young people and attract them to be here and to stay here.
So a couple big winners tonight so far, Saladino, Cygnus, and Ballone as well. We're going to bring on another one of our in-studio reporters, Courtney Fegley. How are you, Courtney? One of the main races you're covering right now, the County Legislator District 3 race. Just what's going on so far in that race?
So far, the Democratic candidate and incumbent, Corey Solage, is in the lead at 75.85%. He is beating his opponent, Republican Nathan Ween. Corey Solage has been the legislator and originally ran to change culture of corruption in Nassau County. He advocates for better government transparency and community relations, infrastructure, sustainable business development, and protect taxpayer interests.
No, go ahead.
Though I'm kind of skeptical. I'm not surprised that he's winning, but he's been involved in some scandals within the past 2 years, being charged with 2 non-criminal charges for domestic abuse regarding his girlfriend and her daughter. So clearly that hasn't beaten him down too much, but I guess we'll see what comes up.
And I think that's interesting when you look at, the fact that he has been involved in some of those scandals, seeking a 5th term. So it's clear that the people of areas like Elmont and Valley Stream, which is where this District 3 is, are definitely, a fan of his and clearly do support him despite some of that controversy that may be surrounding him.
It's domestic violence is a terrible thing, but unfortunately it seems to affect every level of society. It makes no distinctions. Mr. Solange's background as an assistant district attorney in the Bronx, as someone who's revitalized police precincts in Nassau County, shows a commitment to law enforcement. If he is convicted of violence or improper actions, then justice must be served. But in the meantime, voters again may be able to compartmentalize and say, well, let's give him the benefit of the doubt. He's pursuing our interests.
Right.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and I think it's incredibly interesting that he's a Democrat who wants to lower taxes, right? He's been a big proponent of the Belmont
Democrats
area.
hate paying taxes too.
Yeah, well, and but that's not something that you always see. But he's been a big proponent of the $1 billion Belmont area, Elmont Community Project. And then taking like a look at his opponent, who's never run for office before, right? He's got this, as Kenny was saying before, he used the term laundry list. He's got this laundry list of experience running against somebody that doesn't really have any experience at all. Do you think that that his opponent Nathan had any chance in the beginning?
Well, what's to use another sports metaphor, Kenny? There's always somebody who has a puncher's chance. That you never know if the climate is just so that this is someone who wants to shake things up. I think there's a guy in the White House who kind of came that way too, who had no political or military experience and became the leader of the free world. So it's a wonderful thing about America. If you can get enough names on a ballot initiative and you can get your name placed in the ballot, you have as good a chance as anyone if you can make your case.
And let's take now a quick transition over to the Madeline Singis, her victory speech. She again claimed the district attorney's race tonight. Let's hear what she had to say when she took the podium.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. So what can I say? 4 years has passed, and I know it seems like a flash, but I know when you guys look at these guys, the kids, right? What a difference 4 years makes. So, Jay, thank you so much. Where are you, Jay? Yeah, I mean, what an incredible leader that Jay is for all of us, for the Democratic Party. Jay picks candidates who are the right candidates for the job, and hopefully we'll have many more victories. And this is just the beginning of it tonight. So thank you, Jay. Of course, my family, Theo and the kids, my extended family. I'm not going to call them my big fat Greek family because they're all lean and mean and they're all here and they're cheering. But I couldn't do it without them. Have my back constantly every step of the way. So thank you to all of you. I think there's some labor in the room.
And let's now welcome back in one of our in-studio reporters, Katerina Balales. She's been following the county legislator District 1 race. What are we seeing so far in this race, Katerina?
Yes, so in District 1 right now, it is about 75% reported. Currently, incumbent Kevin Abrams is at 85%, whereas Sharice Vanderhall is only at 15.51%. So it's not really a close, tight race at all. It's pretty much Abrams's race to lose. So during the past term that he has been in, he has been focusing on improving the county's infrastructure, and that is a priority for him during his current term. Major roads were resurfaced in his district, and he supports the creation of the county's first independent inspector general office to oversee contracts so that tax dollars are spent without waste, fraud, and abuse. So that is his main goal if he continues to, for his next term, which it looks like he's going to be doing that.
And this is super pertinent, obviously, to the Hempstead area where we broadcast. District 1 is Uniondale and Roosevelt, so obviously super hyper-local here, and seeking his 9th two-year term is Kevin Abrams. As far as District 18, this is something you've also been following, Katerina, areas like Glenhead, Brookville, East Hills. What have we seen so far in this race?
So right now we are about 82% completed, and right now incumbent Joshua Alexander Lafazan is at 69%, whereas Timothy Jenks is only at about 30%. So again, it's not really too close of a race. It's pretty much Lafazan's to lose at this point. And I really liked how Lafazan, during his first term, he only won when he was 23, which is pretty impressive for someone that young and at that age. Currently, I think that he is fighting for rights and programs that not many other candidates are really focusing on. He's focusing a lot on disabled citizens as a top priority, and has been spearheading legislation that helps the deaf and hearing impaired citizens to be able to navigate police stops. In addition, he's also been working with bullying a lot, and has even created a website, nassaustopbullying.org, that makes resources available to students and parents in case anyone is being bullied. So that is something that I think is pretty wonderful.
Thank you very much, Katerina. Again, two super important races here. David and Joshua Lafazan, under 30 years old, we're seeing kind of a political superstar born before our own eyes.
I think what we have in this race here, too, his opponent, Timothy Jenks, also a very young man. I think Mr. Lafazan is about 25 now. He took office, as you say, at 23. But he started early. He was elected to the Syosset School Board as a teenager, so this is a culture that he's well aware of. But I think what we may be seeing here is a generational shift. These are both, do you guys mind being called millennials, or are you even younger than millennials now?
I think, what are we? Are we? No, I think we're younger than millennials, right?
General Z, I think.
Gen Z,
yes, who's keeping track? But the point is that these are both young men who are looking at modern ways of communicating, modern ways of being sure that everyone participates in their government, that things are accessible through your phone, that there's not a mystery, that someone is taking up bullying as an issue, someone who's so close to his own high school experiences and may be able to relate to that better and makes it a priority. This is very encouraging. This is a new generation taking its place among the leaders of the community. It's heartening to see.
And right now we're going to take it back to Jason Siegel, who's currently at Laura Gillen's headquarters in Garden City Hotel. That race is super close. Jason, what are you seeing over there?
That's right, Eli. We've already had one victory speech here at Democratic headquarters at the Garden City Hotel with Nassau County District Attorney Madeline Singas. Democrats here hoping for a similar result in the Hempstead Town Supervisors race, but Democratic incumbent Laura Gillen is in a very close battle with Republican Don Clavin. Right now, Clavin leads by about 100 votes with 69% of precincts reporting. And as mentioned before, third-party candidate Diane Madden was initially a Gillen supporter, and she has over 900 votes, so she's not going to win this race in all likelihood, but she may be playing a key role in taking votes away from the incumbent Laura Gillen. So we'll continue to keep you updated here from the Garden City Hotel as the Hempstead Town Supervisor race comes down to the wire. But for now, Kenny and Eli, we will send it back to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Jason, for that report. So let's get a little bit back to the hyperlocal races that we were just talking about. We were talking about young upstarts like Joshua Lafazan and Timothy Jenks. Both are focusing a lot on the bullying aspect of things and taking things to schools. And we've seen that a lot lately with youth coming into Long Island, people focusing on more young people coming in, and then we have them rising up like this. What do you think that having young people in government positions like this does in a positive effect for Long Island?
Well, it's transformative in the way that we communicate. I think one of the wonderful things about visiting here at Hofstra University is that aspiring journalists now, young people may not think much about journalism or follow the news until they become homeowners, taxpayers, or have children who go to school, and then suddenly they discover the news. These two candidates are trying to bring people into community activism. And just on the subject of bullying, what occurs to me just observing this is addressing the issue of bullying is a way to address the issue of lost potential. People who have been bullied and don't have the confidence to participate, to make their voices heard. Who knows what contributions we're missing out on if people aren't confident enough to express themselves, to gather people around them, to lead movements. So anything that can be done to address that issue, to help people be the best they can be and feel safe and secure about contributing to the communities is going to help all of us, whatever age we are.
And again, Joshua Lafazan in that District 18 race is controlling the polls at this point. Let's bring on Gabby Craig, another one of our in-studio reporters. She's been following the Glen Cove mayoral race very closely. Gabby, what have you seen so far as this race unfolds?
So far, Tankay has been winning with 90% of the votes reported. He has taken the lead in the polls with 55% of the votes. His opponent, Reggie Spinello, is at 45% right now. Tankay is the incumbent. He is running for his second two-year term, and he has previously served 6 terms as city councilman. During his tenure, he has said that he nearly tripled the amount of drinkable water in Glen Cove by reaping water wells that had long been neglected and remediated contamination in others. Tankay has also said that he has presented 2 balanced budgets and will continue to uphold his fiduciary duties to the residents of Glen Cove.
And as for, right now with Tankay leading, Reggie Spinello did hold this office up until 2017 when he lost out to Tankay in that race. what kind of shift have we seen now in Glen Cove, where it seems like Tim Tenke is someone that Democrats and voters alike are looking to go back to here?
Well, this is typical of what we've seen, that the incumbent does have a bit of an advantage, but in this case we have a prior incumbent who has a track record. Voters have a choice. Again, the idea of an off-year election may have depressed some of the turnout, but the motivated folks will turn out. It looks like things are pretty well split there. So if people are willing to give the incumbent a chance, this is their shot. If they wanted to remove him, this was also their shot.
Well, I think what it is you're seeing a change in actions, right? I mean, Spinella was very much focused on the commercial, the residential side of things, building more residences, and the beauty of the area. But what we've really seen from Tenke is, the water wells reopening, right? Things like that, infrastructure, things that have been neglected that he's sort of bringing back to the table.
Which gets back to your point, Eli, about that you were a bit surprised that a Democrat would be a conservative.
Right.
He is conserving
Yes.
what makes Glen Cove special. The water quality, the harbor, the quality of life that attracted people there in the first place. Those are conservative values.
Right, and what do you think that says on a more general idea of trying to get rid of these political silos, right? These ideas that Republicans are conservative and Democrats are liberal. What do you think this says that we have Democrats who are adopting more conservative fiscal values?
I think this goes back to if folks who've been with us when I came aboard on this for analysis, that the nation will be watching Long Island in this off-year election to see how America's first suburb responds to the challenges of the 21st century. We're 20 years in, but perhaps the things that we ingrained and thought were the way they would always be have to change. So we're looking at things in a new way. New means of communications will help us understand what's going on, how it relates to us, and motivate people on a personal level. It may not be the machines that we were so familiar with in the past that turns out votes and more individual actors who are moving from their own point of view and their own consciences.
Right.
And Gabby, you've also been following two other races, the Town of North Hempstead District 2, as well as the Town of North Hempstead Receiver of Taxes. What are we seeing so far in those polls?
So in both of those polls, 100% of the votes have been reported, and Zuckerman has taken the lead for the Town of North Hempstead in the 2nd District with 61% of the votes. And for the Receiver of Taxes in the Town of North Hempstead, Berman has taken the lead with 63% of the votes. Zuckerman was seeking out his second 4-year term after being appointed to fill that vacancy in 2014. And during his nearly 6 years on town council, Zuckerman has said that North Hempstead has trimmed its debt by $32 million and repeatedly received a AAA bond rating. He also has said that he helped to expand Project Independence to offer seniors free transportation to supermarkets and discounted rates to non-emergency doctor's appointments. As for Berman goes, he was seeking out his third 4-year term for the Receiver of Taxes, and he has said that in his almost decade-long experience as the town's Receiver of Taxes and his 6-year tenure at Nassau County Department of Assessment, he has been prepared for the challenges that he faces ahead.
And thank you very much, Gabby. I think that something that really sticks out when you look at any of these district races, and again, as far as these incumbents go, seem like they're continuing to pick up some pace. When you look at Peter Zuckerman, like we said, he is the incumbent seeking a second 4-year term, and he's a guy who has done a nice job of balancing things out, and I think that that's something that people really look for, especially in local leaders.
Well, there's the conundrum of experience. The candidate can say, I have experience, but the voters can say, well, yeah, we've experienced you too. So if it's been a good experience, they're returned to office.
And now we go to Nico Bermudez, who is on standby to talk about the Clavin race. Nico, what do you have over there?
So once again here at Morelli's, Donald Clavin himself has not arrived. However, once again, the race is extremely tight. He has pulled ahead with about a 1,000-point lead as of now, but again, that has changed, has gone back and forth. And it's every minute it's changing. Now, last time I spoke with you guys, I talked about how Clavin is really focusing on tax cuts. Two other big policy things that he's really trying to push for his election bid are infrastructure. So he talks about how Laura Gillen has increased the spending when it comes to infrastructure, but he is saying how more needs to be done. He's talking about how more money needs to be put into the roads, how there's a serious road issue in the town of Hempstead, so that is something he is really looking into. And then the other thing, this kind of goes back to how there was a lot of corruption in the town of Hempstead before Gillen came in. He believes that the town board's budget should be cut in half by $1 million. So those are two major points he's really hitting on, along with the tax cuts. Back to you guys in studio.
Great. Thank you so much, Nico, for that report. Now let's switch it up a little bit and go back to Oyster Bay. We're going to go to Jenny Goldstein, who is live at Joseph Saladino's headquarters at the Garden City Hotel. Jenny, what's going on?
Hey guys, so as I said earlier, at the beginning, Saladino was leading, and then things kind of switched up, and Altadonna was actually leading Saladino by several points, and it flipped back. So now Saladino is currently leading at 59% with just over 28,000 votes, and Altadonna is at 41% with just over 20,000 votes. Some facts about Saladino: he succeeded John Vendito in 2017. He was appointed to be the 70th Oyster Bay Town Supervisor. He's formerly a New York State Assemblyman of the 9th District, and he served 6 terms, so he's been in local government since 2004. He's a huge advocate for the environment and safe drinking water. He also advocates for tax caps and cuts, and he wants to promote transparency and accountability in government. He also has reduced the debt in the town of Oyster Bay by $135 million, which is the largest debt reduction in town history. Back to you guys in the studio.
Thank you very much for that report, Jenny. I want to go back to really, I think, what we need to be following most closely right now, and that's the race for Hempstead Town Supervisor. Right now, 93% of the votes are in. Donald Clavin, 50%, 68,000 votes, and Laura Gillen just about 400 votes behind. And this is very reminiscent to 2017, where things were very close between Laura Gillen and Anthony Santino, the Republican at that time, where at midnight, it was a 3,000 vote difference. Gillen had 80,000-ish, and Santino had close to 78,000, so a little under 3,000 votes separating the two. And it seems like, again here, David, it's going to come down to the wire between these two candidates.
I have to say this is our role as citizens to go out and vote to make our voices heard. People can make their case as to why they should have the office, but if we are not moved to go out and express our support, then it's a cliche, we get what we deserve. There are people who might want the incumbent's agenda to continue. There are people who are appalled by previous corruption. Well, where are you? It's an off-year election. Were you too busy to vote? This year there was early voting. There's always absentee ballots. Did we determine your Generation Z? Do you among your
we did, yes.
Among your cohorts? Among your cohorts, was there any buzz about voting? Did people who live on campus from other areas get their absentee ballots? Right. Things can be very close, and I'd say, well, you're not going to miss my vote. But when things come down to several hundred or 1,000 votes, it's very important. The future of your community can count on that.
And when it's all said and done, David, I think something that we haven't touched on that maybe we should have is the fact that this is the first time you can vote early in New York. You could have gone to the polls a week ago and made your picks for all these various positions. When it comes down to it, and when we look back on this night in a couple of days and pundits analyze and do what they do, how do you think we're going to look at this whole early voting thing? Do you think it's going to change these elections at all, and if so, in what way?
We have to see the consequences. Right. Again, this is the off-year election. Right. Folks are generally not motivated. But if it's a matter of confidence and trust. If in this case, in Nassau County, in Hempstead, if the history of corruption, of people actually being convicted of corruption, hasn't gotten anyone's attention, if voters can believe that the Republican candidates, especially in a community like Oyster Bay, will say that we get it, we're going to be transparent, you can trust us now, and they believe it, well then it's up to the voters to determine that. Otherwise, it's business as usual. You didn't participate, so good for you. You voted for business as usual.
Right, and I think we're really seeing, we were talking about earlier, right, this topic of corruption, and you were saying that if this is what the Republican Party can pull out, right, what is that saying? But I think what we're really seeing here is that maybe the corruption scandals that we've seen in the Republican Party, aren't necessarily as grandiose as we've necessarily thought. If Clavin Jr. can pull out a 50% to 49% lead over Gillen, maybe that's the Republican Party, coming back.
or the entrenched establishment motivating their base. We hate to use the cliches that are going around, but there are people who are beholden to a system for whom it's in their interest to maintain the system. If they are motivated to vote, then they will be turned out, where others may think, we'll let the professionals take care of it, I don't need to participate. That's, again, going back to the 18th district and young people making it possible for other young people, their cohort, their generation, to vote in a way that's meaningful, to keep up on the issues in a way that's convenient and accessible. This is where we're going to have to steer as a society. And we're counting on you, young folks, to communicate with your cohort in a way that reaches them and motivates them in the ways that you communicate with each other. So again, that's another reason that an education at an institute like Hofstra matters so much to our future as a society.
And let's shift away from the Hempstead supervisor race now and go back over to the DA race, where Madeline Singas, the incumbent, has declared victory. Let's hear what she had to say when our own Max Sacco caught up with her at the Democratic headquarters.
What's really the first thing you're going to be going to do?
We're going to keep doing what we've been doing. We're going to make sure that we bring those crime numbers even lower, focusing in on crime drivers, attacking gangs, attacking the heroin epidemic, making sure our public officials know that we're watching, and we're going to continue those investigations as well.
Now, you mentioned MS-13 in your victory speech. Do you plan on bringing them down as well, or bringing down their numbers? What's the steps needed to take them?
We're going to continue doing what we've been doing. We've brought down MS-13 homicides significantly in Nassau County. In fact, we had 0 this year. So we're going to keep making sure that we have a bullseye on their back. We're going to make sure that our foot is on their neck.
And we apologize for some technical difficulties on that interview there, as it was a little tough to hear the district attorney, Madeline Singas. And as we get set to welcome in another one of our in-studio reporters here, I do want to circle back to the discussion we had earlier as far as Madeline Singas goes and what's more important to the voters. And it's clear that still now, 2 years later, the issue of opioid addiction is more still on the mind of voters than so much gangs, which was what her challenger was really, pushing.
When something like that touches your family or touches you directly, it's the #1 issue. Folks, I think probably the saddest thing in the world is losing a child. Previous waves of drug addiction, families were concerned about the health and safety of their children. In this case, it's the adults that are falling to drug abuse, and children are being left without parents, or parents are irresponsible to look after their children. So it's a scourge that we face. The death toll is astronomical. It is an epidemic. But just listening to that interview, we had to cut away from it because of the sound of celebrating was interfering with the audio. But one thing that Ms. Singas said twice, we're going to keep doing what we've been doing. That's what she was elected to do. And again, that gets back to what an incumbent is for and what the voter's voice can reaffirm. The community has decided that she's on the right track, her values are square where they are, and they've elected her to have another chance to continue.
With her emphasis on opioid crisis, do you think that that'll put the gang epidemic that we have here, right, the issues that we have with gangs here on Long Island, do you think that'll take a back seat?
We're looking at gangs of unscrupulous doctors and prescribers, gangs of drug manufacturers who are irresponsible about pushing their product and searching for profits. It's systemic. And there are those who will point the finger at distributors in China or Mexico who are bringing drugs into the country and say, we'll stop that, we'll stop the problem. No, it's a systemic problem, and it has to be stopped on many fronts. And Ms. Singas campaigning against opioids, also campaigning against guns, against domestic violence, against animal abuse. It's all of a whole. So voters have determined that, as she says, she should continue doing what she's been doing.
And again, you're listening to our live election night coverage of Election Night 2019 right here on WRHU. Also, maybe watching us on Facebook. We're going to welcome in, as we approach the midnight hour here, our final in-studio reporter of the night. That's Eliza Kravitz, and she's been following the Town of North Hempstead supervisor race closely. Eliza?
Yes, and 100% of the votes are in, and it is Judy Bosworth to win Town of North Hempstead supervisor. She won with 66% of the votes. She got a total of 21,896 votes. And she really wants to work on rebranding North Hempstead as a destination place.
And I think that when we look at Bosworth now seeking her, well, this now is her fourth term as supervisor here. What has she done? You talk about, rebranding the town of North Hempstead, but she's had some opportunities to do that. What have been some of her major contributions so far that you can kind of, speak to, either Eliza or David?
Eliza, please.
Yeah.
Well, she just describes herself as a consensus builder and a community leader. So I think in that way she is like showing everyone in the community and leading them and leading by example.
And she did spend 16 years on the Board of Education, and I think that's something that we haven't really seen with any of the candidates is extensive experience with education, with being on a management position on an education board. I think that's interesting that we're seeing that sort of come out in this race.
I remember a bumper sticker, if you think education is expensive, try ignorance. So yes, education is important. But Eliza also pointed out something that's important too, that many of us overlook about Long Island and the communities that we live in. We go to work, we do our shopping, maybe online, we don't get out and look around. North Hempstead isn't just Northern Hempstead, it is its own community with a shoreline, and that's a wonderful resource. The Long Island Water Conference and other environmental groups around the island are citing Judy Bosworth for her efforts in controlling flooding and making sure that this beautiful shoreline asset resource is not underwater. Also, proximity to New York City is an issue for North Hempstead. An issue that I recall was that flood control measures at the Throg's Neck toward New York City, mitigating chances of flooding in New York City may actually exacerbate the risks of flooding in North Hempstead. So this is where regional approaches have to come in. If you want people to enjoy your coastline, the gems of your community should not be underwater.
And Eliza, you were also covering a couple other races. Do you want to catch us up on where you are with those?
Nassau County Legislator for the 4th District was won by Denise A. Ford of the Democratic ticket. She won by 66% with a total of 8,879 votes. And in her current term where she served, she sponsored the law banning of styrofoam, which she said was a win for the environment.
Well, thank you so much for those. So let's get back to the town of North Hempstead supervisor, right? So we're talking a lot about infrastructure, and we're talking a lot about improving roads, improving schools, improving that kind of thing. But we've seen a lot of victories tonight for people that are focused more on on clean water and things like that. But Judy Bosworth is focused on making the town pretty again. We've actually seen a couple losses tonight for people that were focusing on that. Why has that strategy worked for Ms. Bosworth when it hasn't worked for other candidates?
She has a record. Again, she's had some successes. She's pushed for things that look down the road, the bigger picture. Your coastline is a resource. You should protect it. There's beauty there. You want people to come in and spend their money enjoying the beauty of your community. And that, again, the holistic point, people have to feel safe there. There have to be venues that will attract theaters, restaurants, entertainment, sports, things that make a thriving community. All of that depends on having a healthy environment. And that's something people can't overlook. Responsible development in places that do not exacerbate flooding. There has to be flood plains along with housing. All these things take cooperation, communication, and people who are confident that dollars that go toward development don't end up in a connected crony's pocket, but go to enriching the community as an investment.
And we do have some major developments in the Hempstead race for town supervisor, as Donald Clavin Jr. is still holding on to 50% of the vote, with 99% reporting, so still close here, 73,000 to 71,000. We have our own Jason Siegel on standby at the Garden City Hotel. Jason, take it away.
Thanks, Kenny. As you said, Clavin leads by about 2,000 votes, with 99% of precincts reporting results. And both Democratic incumbent Laura Gillen and Republican Don Clavin, they ran on similar platforms. They both called for tax cuts, both introduced plans to improve infrastructure and roads in the area. But the most important figure in this race may have been Libertarian candidate Diane Madden, she has about 1,200 votes and was initially a Gillen supporter, was Madden, so she may have taken away some key votes from Gillen and was turning out to be a very close race. Of course, it was a historic win for Gillen 2 years ago. She became the first Democrat in over 100 years to be Hempstead's town supervisor, but Clavin, who has been Hempstead's receiver of taxes since 2001, now appears to be regaining control of the town supervisor seat for the Republicans once again. That's the latest from Democratic headquarters here at the Garden City Hotel. Kenny and Eli, we'll send it back to you.
Great. And we're just going to send it right back to Nico Bermudez, who's there at Clavin's headquarters. Nico, what is it looking like over there with a 2,000 vote lead?
Well, I'll tell you what, guys. Everyone here seems to be extremely excited, very energized. So you have chants of "We Want Don" going on. People are singing, people are clapping, people are even dancing over here. Don Clavin has not shown his face, but it looks like he might be walking in now. There's a big crowd of people walking in with people cheering. So it looks like he may be coming in with 99% reporting. Everyone here is starting to claim that he has won. So it's looking like he will regain control for the Republicans in the town of Hempstead. Back to you guys.
Thank you very much, Nico. And I think that's something that, to me, sticks out here. Jason touched on it a little bit, and I want to get your opinion on this, David. The Libertarians vote in this, Diane Madden receiving about 1,250 votes. Is that maybe a reason we can point to Laura Gillen maybe losing some steam here? Who do you think that this impacted and how in this race, because it was so close?
That is significant. Eli pointed that out earlier, the potential of a Madden effect on Gillen's candidacy. This is, I think it's happened on the national stage a number of times. Your history teachers will tell you about Ralph Nader possibly splitting off some votes and putting George W. Bush in the White House. That Ross Perot had a surprising candidacy as a third-party candidate and may have put Bill Clinton in the White House. This is a reason that some government analysts are encouraging fusion voting, where you would take a person like Madden and accept an endorsement from a libertarian for the Democrat and hold those votes to put away an ideological opponent. Again, the full count isn't in. We'll see what happens. There may be absentee ballots. There may be a call for a recount. But it is a significant factor, and it's something that has to be addressed by the political scientists on campus. I'm sure they'll have some answers for you.
We were actually talking about Madden a little bit earlier. You know, she's an animal activist. She's a rights activist. She's a mom of 4. Should we be encouraging third-party candidates to be coming out and voting, or do you think that that's causing problems maybe for the major parties?
That's been the dilemma for as long as I've been alive, at least, that you don't want to splinter off and have the less popular candidate win office by consensus. Again, that's why some prefer fusion voting. But who are we as Americans? Who are we to say that it has to be black or white, Coke or Pepsi? Someone resonates with enough voters to generate a plurality like that has to be listened to. So we'll see how this plays out, but definitely a significant factor.
Yeah, and there's one big issue with having a 50-50 split for an election like this is you wind up with about 50% of the population that doesn't like how it turned out. How do you sort of recover as a community with 50% of the people not agreeing with who's in charge?
Isn't that the dilemma of America from our founding? We do have to remember who we are, what our ideals are, and that we are a community. We may look at different approaches, but as we've been discussing, all of us want to see the opiate crisis ended. All of us want safe streets. All of us want an end to gang violence. We'll find a different pathway there, but we have to have the consensus to say this is our objective. Let's work together to achieve it. And that's the ideal that we have to always keep in mind, whatever municipality, state, local, county, federal, as Americans, we share a destiny. And that sounds highfalutin and idealistic, right, but that's really what our country is founded on.
And how much, I mean, you mentioned that, the Republican base here in Nassau County being so strong. How much does this say that, Republicans have, or Republicans and just maybe the general voter who maybe swings to either side or, is not really too committed to either party, how much do you feel like the Republicans have been able to kind of resurrect, I would say, their image here over the last 2 years? And do you think it's kind of an impact of that, or maybe a stronger candidate in Cleveland, or people wanting change? What do you attribute it to?
It may be self-interest. People have aligned themselves with a party, with a machine, if you will, and it's in their interest to maintain that structure. So they feel that if the machine totally collapsed, they'd lose any advantage they have in hiring and steering dollars to their community, to their interests.
Right.
So they dig their heels in, they might hold their nose and hope that there's a more ethical candidate, but it's still their structure, their team, and they're going to support it.
And we have Donald Clavin up now giving his victory speech. Let's hear from the Hempstead supervisor.
Tomorrow morning, 7:43, 7:52, 8:06. I'm taking all three of you in the bus, and we're going to have the best day ever. Yes! Thank you to all of you. This has been a race. This has been a grueling race. But you know what? We all work together as a team. And it's not just a GOP team. I look around this room and you know what? I see independents. I see the CSA workforce that came out there earlier. Terry, thank you very much. I see Reverend Watson standing right there, who months ago, with Bishop Gates, Pastor John, gave me that support and that encouragement. Ladies and gentlemen, we have made commitments, we have made promises, and we are going to deliver that to the taxpayers by putting them first. But you know what? This is about you, ladies and gentlemen, watching TV. This is about the taxpayers. This is about a government that works together and does great things, and I pledge that with all of my colleagues, both Republicans and Councilwoman Gooseby. Yeah. We're all going to work together. Jeremy, can I have one more second? Listen. Now, I intend to keep my promises. I intend to keep every promise I've made along this campaign trail. And I did make one strong promise the last 2 weeks, folks. And this is going to be the best one. Ladies and gentlemen, the drinks are on Cleveland tonight! Best bill ever! On Cleveland!
And again, you just heard and watched parts of Donald Clavin's victory speech as he claimed victory over Laura Gillen tonight, the incumbent for the Hempstead Town Supervisor race. So obviously, this was the one that came, we were covering 4 major ones, right? Obviously heading into this, but this was the one that really came down to the wire here. And I just, as we circle back to Clavin, it seemed like an energized victory speech. I mean, who wouldn't be energized after just winning a huge, closely contested race? But is there anything that stuck out to you guys in that speech?
Other than taxes, 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 and promises. I mean, it's very clear that he is passionate about wanting to keep the promises that he made on the campaign trail. And a lot of that comes with his promise to hold up his tax relief. He's claimed that he helped create the 2019 and proposed 2020 budgets, which include tax cuts. He wants to double budgets to improve roads, and tax relief is his top priority. And obviously, he's coming in as the town's receiver of taxes, so that's super important to him. What do you think of his promise to uphold his promises?
Well, it's one thing to promise tax cuts. I think if you observe everyone who promises tax cuts comes in, opens the files, looks around and says, oh my God, we're in trouble. Maybe we won't cut taxes. Maybe we'll raise some taxes. They have to keep the ship righted and going forward. Otherwise, financial disaster. The whole county has that experience. There's a state financial control board in place. Let's remember, too, as he was giving that speech, he pointed out to the team that supported him. He also pointed out to labor, one of the municipal employees unions. That means contracts for contractors, paid for with taxes. Hempstead has a budget of $433 million. Largest town in the United States with 750,000 people. That's a lot of money, a lot of contracts, a lot of building. So again, this team looks like it has brought its team players in line. We'll see how well they do.
And again, Cleveland and the Republicans claiming victory in this race. Let's swing it over to the Democratic side where Jason Siegel's at Laura Gillen's Democratic headquarters. Jason, what's the mood there at the headquarters right now?
Yeah, thanks, Kenny. Not giving up hope just yet, but not looking good for Laura Gillen and the Democrats here at Democratic headquarters at the Garden City Hotel. And both Laura Gillen and the Republican opponent, Don Clavin, were on very similar platforms, both calling for tax cuts as well as improvements in infrastructure and investments in the city's, in the area's roads. And I really think the candidate that made the difference was third-party candidate Diane Madden. She ran on a Libertarian ticket, but was initially a supporter of Gillen. She had over 1,200 votes, so this wasn't a race that she was going to win, but I do think she ended up taking away some key votes for Laura Gillen. And, of course, it was jubilation here 2 years ago for the Democrats, first time in over a century that a won the supervisor's race, but now it is looking like the Republicans are going to be regaining control. So that's the latest here at headquarters, and Kenny and Eli will send it back to you.
And again, thank you, Jason, reporting from what has to be, at this point, at least a nervous Democratic headquarters. Again, we should credit News 12 for that Don Clavin victory speech before, so a courtesy, a thank you to them goes out. But just, I mean, how big a loss is this for the Democrats here in Nassau County who were looking to kind of build off of that victory in 2017?
Well, of course, it's always a setback, but we have, pointing out again, this is an off-year election. We have a presidential election next year. The Democratic establishment may have a chance to bring its people out and folks who may not be following politics as a rule to participate in the election next year. This is a chance to regroup and look forward to much greater voter participation. Losing the top office in the largest town, of course, that's a big setback, but there's a chance to take other races and have an influence in the decisions that are made out of the supervisor's office.
Do you think that if it does turn out that Gillen does lose this election, do you think that this is the last thing that we've seen of her? Do you think she'll come back?
You know, one of the people I believe I recognized looking at the footage, the video from the headquarters, a gentleman named Bruce Blakeman, who, if you are new to this area, you might know that he's had a number of roles in the Republican establishment throughout metropolitan New York. There are players who are gifted and will find a role and stay on the field if they are community servants who know what they're doing and know how to be effective and have that fire. They don't just fade away. They will always find a way to participate.
Right.
What do we think that in 2 years Don Clavin, Nassau County kind of looks like? I mean, what are some early projections here? And when we're sitting at the table in 2 years, will we be talking about another flip where you think that Don Clavin's going to be able to kind of rally that Republican energy here in Nassau County and continue building off of this? Especially
on the local level, right? How is this going to affect the average everyday person living in the county?
That's the excitement of it, isn't it? That's the suspense. Is it going to be a return to the old ways? I think everyone knows that they can't go back to the old ways. Things are changing. There are new generations. The makeup of the county is shifting too. We have a larger and growing immigrant community. Things can't be done the way they were done before. We frankly can't afford it. So he has the challenge. He wanted it. He asked for it. After the party is over and the celebrating, he's got a lot of work ahead of him.
Absolutely. And taking a little bit of a break from the Hempstead race, we're going to go to Jenny Goldstein, who is on standby at Saladino's headquarters in the race for Oyster Bay with 96% of the polls in. Jenny, what do you have over there?
That's correct. 96% of the votes are in. Saladino is still at 59% with 32,408 votes. Altadena has 41% with 22,473 votes. Saladino's opponent, Altadena, is the current Oyster Bay Town Clerk. He's held this position since June of 2013, and he was actually previously the mayor of Massapequa Park for 12 years. There was an October 29th op-ed in Newsday that actually endorsed Altadonna's campaign against Saladino, claiming that the Oyster Bay Town Supervisor role needed, quote, a steady, independent hand. And according to Altadonna's campaign website, he focused on efficiency during his tenure as mayor and achieved cost reductions in Massapequa Park. And Altadonna says that a major goal that he wanted to accomplish is balancing the town budget. Back to you guys.
And thank you again, Jenny, for that report from Joseph Saladino's headquarters. So 2 of the major positions tonight in the town of Oyster Bay, supervisor, as well as the town of Hempstead, claimed by Republicans. When you look at the Oyster Bay side, things a little bit more lopsided. Saladino claiming 32,000 of the votes, just 22,000 for Altadonna. In this case, Saladino was an incumbent, and he was a guy who was, appointed, we talked about it before, to kind of come in, clean things up, and get the job done. And it's clear by the voters' reaction that they think he did do that job through his 2 years in office.
Clearly, that the establishment, the Republican establishment in the town of Oyster Bay, got rid of something corrupt at the top, and sought another leader, someone who could keep things going in their interest, who hopefully can be trusted. So, good luck, Mr. Saladino.
Absolutely. And then flipping it to the other side of the equation for the Oyster Bay race, we go to Amira Iftikhar, who is at Altadonna's headquarters right now. Amira, what is the atmosphere like over there?
Now that it's getting late, they just called saying that they're going to recount Gillen's vote by tomorrow, so a lot of people are leaving out here. But the race is still on between Altadonna and Saladino, but it seems at this point that Saladino is going to maintain strongly onto his lead. And that's all I got for you tonight.
Thank you for that, Amira. As we take a look again at this race between Saladino and Altadonna, obviously a loss for Altadonna, who came in looking to unseat that Republican. Just taking a look at a couple of other races that we've kind of had our eyes on throughout the night. We haven't checked in on the town clerk race here in Hempstead in quite a while, and right now it's Kate Murray with 99% reporting at 51% over Sylvia Cabana, who is the incumbent. So when you look at this right now, 73,000 to 70,000 votes here with 99%, and it seems as if we saw Kate Murray at the podium a bit before during Donald Clavin's, or right after Donald Clavin's speech. It seems like Kate Murray is going to find her way back into office, at least at this point here in 2019.
Well, so much for the aggrieved Islanders vote. They may have forgiven her. She is an experienced town clerk. She is someone who is well known throughout all of Long Island. She also has a reputation. People think this is a responsibility that she's up to and can handle, and they make their voices heard at the polls.
So what we've seen so far with different wins tonight that we've got several wins for Republicans, several wins for Democrats. We've now got 2 town supervisors that are Republicans and 2 county executives that are Democrats. So what do you think this looks like in terms of change-ups for the average local person on a hyper-local level?
I think it comes back to our initial observation about Long Island as America's first suburb in a turbulent time in our nation's history. Don't want to say, well, I will say there is still a Republican stronghold in Nassau County that is maintaining itself. It's a blue state, New York, and we have Democrats who are leading in the major offices, but there are pockets of people who are ideologically lined up with the regime in Washington, who maintain their roots in the past, who are part of the system and want to maintain the system that has worked to their advantage so far. That's really where I see it. Looking to your generation again as the ones who will have to communicate with your cohort to advance your values in ways that you communicate with each other going into the future. That's the direction that we'll have to take.
And is there anything that you would take away? All of these are hyper-local, obviously, elections, and it is an off year. You could say off as many times as you want to guess. But when you look at kind of the impact moving forward towards 2020, because that's what everyone's going to care about, really at the end of the day. I think that's going to be the main takeaway that a lot of people are going to be talking about tomorrow on CNN and Fox and all those stations is did we learn anything about 2020 from these races? Would you say that anything here in Nassau kind of struck your eye as being something that, maybe has changed?
I think we're going to have to wait for the dust to settle. I really do. But this is where any trends that once the analysts, the political scientists look at this, they will be reflected in suburban races throughout the country. Looking beyond Long Island, there are gubernatorial races in Mississippi and Kentucky. That these are deeply red states. There's also legislative races in Virginia, which is described as a purple state, but it has a growing suburban population. Trends that happen here will be reflected in those states. Dollars among the political parties will be used to support candidates to move in their direction based on the results that were found here today on Long Island. I believe that.
And I think that that's something, for sure moving forward, that we're just going to kind of have to wait and see, how the dust settles here as far as these different races go. We're just waiting on some sound as far as Laura Gillen and the attempted recount. It seems like that they're going to go with here. Do you think the recount can change anything? I mean, it came down to a matter of 2,000-3,000 votes, and you look at, like we mentioned, absentees and things like that as we wait. What does this say? Can we see any results here? Is there any sort of precedent for this?
Ken, I will say yes, of course we have to wait. We have to get an accurate count.
Right.
Sometimes we can't count on that because there's corruption and a lot of questions about our voting systems. But one thing we will see is that it's going to be much harder to have the level of corruption that we experienced before. There is a danger because, I'm going to get on my journalism soapbox, there's not as much local news reporting as there once was. And corruption thrives where there is not investigative reporting. So your generation of reporters and aspiring reporters have the tools to make sure that people don't get away with these things. You're going to have to find new ways of keeping an eye on municipalities to make sure that tax dollars are spent appropriately, that they're not steered to cronies. It's going to be harder, but it's up to you to use the tools of your generation to keep tabs on these people so that you can do your work on behalf of your generation to give accurate information for making reliable decisions. So for now, maybe some people are taking advantage of lack of transparency, but we have digital fingerprints everywhere. It's going to be harder and harder. Your generation of reporters will be the ones that will be holding people accountable. So that's what we're working for.
Well, and you see that a lot in like we were talking about before, right? The young people that are running for office, right? And even the people like Madden, right, who don't have this enormous fan base, who are running as third-party candidates, right? You see that in Josh Lafazan, who just won at only 25 years old, his second term, right? You see people like Saladino who are trying to pull young people into Long Island. You see that initiative being taken, but I think what's really important to note is that you have schools, you have colleges that are focusing on journalistic integrity. I think it's important to touch on the fact that we've talked a little bit about it, but political siloing is really important. And I think it's up to our generation, especially, to try and stop political siloing from happening or reversing it. And we were talking about, right, with Singas, who just won the DA race. She's a Democratic conservative, so she's trying to cross those party lines by saying, look, it's okay to be a Democrat, to have these liberal views, but also to have conservative ideas in terms of fiscal, social, that kind of thing.
Oh, there are ideas and ideals. And unfortunately, it's been this way for generations, I think as long as we've been a country, that once money enters the picture and people are influenced by money, no matter how idealistic they are when they're started, they see an advantage to staying with a machine and advancing its interests because it rewards them financially as well. So people have to keep an eye on each other. Again, reporters have to make sure that things are done squarely, openly, and we see the Republican candidates promising that they will be transparent,
Right.
that they will root out corruption. Let's hold them to
Well,
their
they have
word.
to be transparent like that because of the corruption scandals that we've seen so far.
Well, they say they do. It's up to a good press to keep an eye on everyone and make sure things are fair and square.
Absolutely.
And we have Jason Siegel, who is on site at the election headquarters of Laura Gillen. He's got a report on what looks like it'll be an attempted recount from her campaign. Let's hear what he has to say.
That's right. Thanks, Kenny. Democrats are not quite ready to give up on the Hempstead supervisors race. They are calling to say that They still need to count the absentee ballots, and they are vowing not to give up. So we know our Republican candidate, Don Clavin, has already declared victory, but the Democrats declaring that they are not going to give up and are going to call for a recount. And, of course, this was a seat that Democrats worked so hard to obtain. Republicans held it for 100 years, and now just 2 years later, it appears Republicans were poised to get it back, so Democrats not going to give it up very easily. Back to you guys.
Yeah. And again, that was Jason Siegel on site at the Democratic headquarters. We're going to get ready to wrap this up. I'll just go to you guys very briefly. Any final takeaways from tonight and election night 2019?
Oh, that's my cue. Well, yes. One of the things that's most reinforcing, this sounds self-serving as a guest, but I am so pleased to see the war room that you have put together here at Hofstra. The level of reporting is impressive, and I'm very pleased if I've been able to participate. As far as the races go, my observation again is that the once enormously powerful Republican machine in Nassau County has been called out. They have a powerful base that has returned many to office. This is their opportunity to prove that they can keep classic Republican ideals alive into the new century. Let's see, they've won the office. Let's see, they have the opportunity and can fulfill it.
I think the really important thing that I'm noticing, especially in a lot of these races, is that a lot of candidates are running on very similar platforms, right? So no matter who takes the victory, right, Democrats or Republicans, we're seeing infrastructure, bringing more young people to Long Island, more affordable housing, tax cuts, and it doesn't really matter the political party that people are running on. It seems like everybody's sort of more or less on the same page with where they'd like to be. So that's a really good sign for me that people are sort of starting to get on the same page, right? As you said before, we're one Long Island, we're one unified front.
Literally an island.
Literally an island.
Yes.
So I think that's really important to note too.
And we will keep our eyes out on that recount coming in the Hempstead Town Supervisor race with Donald Clavin claiming victory for now. But that'll do it for our coverage of Election Night 2019. A special thanks to go around to the entire WRHU News team. Election Night was produced by Lauren Brill and Courtney Ingalls. Running the board tonight right here on our WRHU mixing site were Shayna Sengstock and Tom Bauer. Making this broadcast possible on Facebook Live was John Sinelli. Our in-studio reporters were Danny Kosick, Gabby Craig, Eliza Kravitz, Katarina Bawales, Celia Earl, and Courtney Fegley. Reporting on site at election headquarters were Jenny Goldstein, Nico Bermudez, Amira Iftikhar, Jason Siegel, Victoria Bell, Rebecca Canfield, Kate O'Brien, and Maximilian Sacco. Cassidy Slamman helped out with social media for tonight's coverage. WRHU's general manager is Bruce Avery. John Mullen is in charge of WRHU operations. Pete Silverman is our professional in residence, and our chief engineer is Andy Gladding. For our expert panelists, David North and my co-host Eli Finkelson, I'm Kenny Conrad signing off saying have a good night and have a great rest of 2019.